Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League. And we're going to get right into it because I have been waiting for this for a while, as I'm sure a lot of you have as well. And if you don't know what the Snyder Cut is, I'm going to try to give you the quickest version of the story. So Zack Snyder, director of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, also was directing the 2017 film Justice League, but due to personal tragedies in his family, he wasn't able to complete his project. Joss Whedon was put on the project as a director and changed a lot of things in the movie. And we are talking about one or two scenes here and there. This was huge tonal shifts, color correcting, the VFX, character arcs cut here and there, and the whole thing just did not feel cohesive. And fans being fans, we don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes and the studios, but I think everyone who watched that film who knew Zack Snyder's style would instantly recognize that, hold on, something's happening here. So a whole petition started to release the Snyder Cut, which is Zack Snyder's original version of the film, just brushed off by studio executives for years and years until last year they finally gave him the money to complete his film, his 4-hour vision of the Justice League film, and now it's been released on HBO Max, or if you're in the UK like me, you can see it on Sky TV. So the main question that everyone is dying to know the answer to is it worth it? Was this whole campaign worth it? Is the 4-hour viewing experience worth it? And I can safely say, absolutely. I haven't seen the original Justice League cut since it came out in the theaters. I remember, enjoying it enough for what it was at the time, but nothing in me wanted to go back and see it. And the more I heard about, this project, what happened, I just had no interest in going back to it. And I kept on finding more and more things that I disliked about the movie. Now, having seen the Snyder Cut, I'm just happy to report that everything that I hated about that original Justice League film was simply not there anymore. So as a fan, I think it's really reassuring to know that these characters have actually been handled with care, with respect, and with the reverence that a true fan of the DC Comics universe would. As I think Zack has demonstrated time and time again, he has such a beautiful and very specific eye when it comes to visuals. I think whatever you think about the story or the script, you can't deny that his visual signature is so uniquely him, and I understand that it's not for everyone, but for me personally, that is how I want my comic books depicted on screen. There's a massive improvement in the VFX in the film. You can see the attention to detail that the team has put into just making the things come to life on screen, especially Steppenwolf. In the original cut, he had this horrible armor, and in this one you have more of that scaly armor that's responsive to movement, and it just makes everything come to life a little bit more. Color grading is massively improved, so no more of those red skies in the grand finale. There's a signature use of Zack Snyder in slow motion, but also in the right moments. I noticed this from the beginning when they had Wonder Woman and her action scene when she's saving a bunch of kids from these terrorists at the bank, and I remember the original scene just did not have that weight to it, and I noticed in this scene specifically how well Zack Snyder utilizes the slow motion in contrast to speeding up the movement, so you can see Wonder Woman's super speed when it matters. Junkie XL is back on the soundtrack, which means a lot of original scores. None of that light-hearted music that takes you out of the moment. For the rest of the music choices, it was a little bit reminiscent of Watchmen for me, actually. That's what I kept thinking about during this whole thing. Because I think Watchmen, this is an ensemble film. You have heroes coming together, even though Watchmen is a much more darker take on it. Justice League isn't a dark film. I would say from the 3 that he's done, even though I don't agree with the premise that, his movies are hopeless and bleak and all that kind of stuff, I've always seen a lot of hope in his takes, even when the atmosphere feels dark. I would say that Justice League is the lightest of the 3. And even though it has an R rating, I feel like teens could still watch this. I'm not a parent, so I can't decide for you, but I think the R rating comes from a few swear words here and there. When you compare it with Watchmen, which also has an R rating, I would not recommend kids or like young teenagers to see that, just because the themes are much more adult. But in like the Snyder cut of the Justice League as a whole, I don't think it is inappropriate for children. So we're gonna get into the characters now, and we're gonna start with Cyborg because he really is what holds this story together, which is why it's so baffling to me that he was cut from the original version in the extent that he was. So Cyborg's connection to the mother box is explored a lot more, and this is also tied into his backstory with his family. You can't have one without the other, it is all connected. You get to see that scene of him on the football field winning that game. He looks up to his mother, cheering at him from the bleachers, and you can see him beaming with happiness, with joy, and then he realizes that his father isn't there, and you see his face immediately drops. And in the next scene, you see him and his mom in the car ride, and he just looks so sad. Like, my heart was genuinely broken in that scene, and this was before anything happened. It was just like seeing a kid who didn't have his father there for him when he needed him to be. Within like a 3-minute scene, I was already emotionally more invested in his story than anything else. And then we see the accident that happens that takes his mother's life and, takes out like half his body. And there's a sequence of events that's portrayed that shows how his father, in desperation, uses the mother box, the alien tech, to save his life, and it turns him into a cyborg. And as he's struggling with that internally, we also learn a lot about how his powers work from the inside. I don't think this was shown in the original cut at all, because I was seeing these scenes and I was like, whoa, I've never thought of it that way. I've never seen Cyborg's powers portrayed that way. Because the film takes us inside his mind, shows us how he is connected to all of the, technological systems of the world, how he can easily have access to, nuclear missiles, launch codes, bank accounts, financial systems, all of that stuff. Every time Cyborg's doing something with his powers, we like go inside his mind and he's kind of like walking through the world in these like beautiful set pieces. Like there's this one scene where he is watching the security footage from a waitress, a single mother waitress who is struggling with her life, financially as well. She's unable to go back to her house, presumably because she couldn't pay rent or something. And you see him just like take a stack of cash and give it to her, and we cut to the scene in the real world when she's outside at an ATM machine and she finds that money in her bank account, and she's crying with joy, and Cyborg's like, he's pleased with himself as he walks off into the night. But we see that's the kind of person he is, which we really did not get an insight to at all in the original film. Before the accident, there's a scene when he got called into the principal's office for hacking the records and helping a struggling classmate pass her class, and the principal's trying to like berate him for doing this in front of his mother, who defends him mercilessly. I just love how we got to see what type of person he is, what type of family he came from, because you see how he gets these morals from his mother, and you see how he gets his determination from, both his parents really, because his father is a scientist that would stop at nothing to not only do his work, but also save his son, even at the cost of potentially unleashing a dangerous alien thing onto the world. I would say that even though there is tragedy in his story, it really does not end in tragedy. When the mother boxes are tempting him to allow them to fuse, because that's the thing that's going to destroy the world and turn it into Darkseid's apocalypse. And the mother boxes takes on the form of his mom, his dad, and him looking back at him saying, we can be a family again, let it all go, surrender yourself, like, oh my little broken boy, you don't have to be alone. And Cyborg realizes, the value of this new life that he has ahead of him, the team that he's bonded with, which I will talk about soon, and he says, I'm not broken and I'm not alone. So it's a very hopeful film, Alright, we're gonna go straight into the next character. So Bruce Wayne is probably one of the main characters that were hurt a lot more by the unnecessary jokes written into the Joss Whedon cut, the Justice League, and I can safely say in this one, all gone. So without the additional quips and these like one-liners, I think it might feel that Bruce Wayne is a lot more understated in this film. He talks a lot less, which is in tune with his character a lot more. But what we do see is a more coherent story of how he has individually connected with the team and how he has brought them together. In many ways, this story is about stepping into the light, because they're all dealing with the death of Superman, and of course with this Steppenwolf apocalypse looming down, a lot of our heroes are feeling terrified and hopeless, but Bruce Wayne isn't one of them, even though you might think that he has the most reason to feel this way because of what happened in Batman v Superman. You know, he's probably carrying a lot of that guilt still from what he did to Superman, but his attitude really doesn't show that in this film, and I think it makes a lot of sense because he is the one who is most determined to carry on Superman's legacy. So compared to Batman v Superman, you get a Bruce Wayne that's a lot less jaded. To be real, he was a little bit out of his mind in Batman v Superman. He was going through it a little bit, but in the Justice League, he really takes on the mantle of the leader of the team. He references, you know, having faith in things a couple times in this film to Alfred. I wouldn't call him an optimist because I'm not sure how accurate that is to his character, but when you think about like the core of what Batman represents, it's making sure that the world is a safer place and that nothing that happened to him as a child will happen to anyone else. So you take away like the dark and gritty aspect of all of it, you know, the violence, the vigilante thing. That's like what's most important to him, and you really see that in this film by the way he treats his new team members. And this is what I loved about the Snyder Cut, was that all of their interactions and their growth felt so natural and organic. They had a lot of mutual respect for one another, and there was none of that like forced antagonism that was in the Whedon cut, which is like very Whedon style, you know, when you think about the Avengers when they were all influenced by Loki's scepter. Because when it comes to Zack Snyder's films, there isn't much room for like petty bickering, just because that's not the route that he's taken with his characters. These characters are all very dignified, they're mature. Even the more lighthearted ones like Barry Allen, they don't end up being caricatures of themselves at any point. They just feel like people coming together at a time of crisis, understanding what the stakes are, and they just get down to business. Zack Snyder said, "The Justice League are a team of professionals and they're gonna get the work done." For example, in the scene when they're deciding whether to bring Superman back or not, you see Victor showing what the mother boxes were capable of, bringing someone back to life, and everyone's just standing around the table like quietly looking at each other, looking at the, the little hologram of Superman, and Barry's just like, right, I know everyone's thinking the same thing. And some of them had their reservations. I think Arthur was like, are you sure this is a good idea? And Bruce was like, yes, we have to do it. And they discuss things in a very calm and rational manner, and they just get to it. I will say though, if you are a Batman fan, and if you're wondering whether there's like a really cool action sequence in this one, reminiscent of the warehouse fight in BVS, I don't think there is any, unless my memory betrays me. There isn't a lot of Batman-centric action scenes in here. A lot of other characters had massive improvements in their action scenes. For example, Wonder Woman and The Flash are probably my biggest ones. Batman didn't have much of the spotlight here when it comes to that, which I personally didn't mind because I had my fill in Batman v Superman, and it's nice seeing him in a more leadership role in this one. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you're like a hardcore Batman fan and this is what you have been waiting for, you might be a little bit disappointed. There's also a lot more Alfred in this cut. I thought I should just throw that out there. For all the Alfred stans out there, yeah, this is a great day for you. Alright, so the Flash was another character who had a massive upgrade from the Justice Cut. His powers were portrayed a lot more here. To see a lot more of his backstory, including that scene with Iris West. Kiersey Clemons, I'm so glad she's back in this film. There are a lot more scenes of him with his dad as well, Henry Allen, so who's still in prison. And you see how that has influenced his drive to want to become a superhero. Because Barry Allen is honestly one of my favorite characters, and I know I literally just said this like one video ago on my channel, that I had no confidence in them pulling off the Flash film, but after seeing this film, I can really see it a lot more. Because my problem when I first saw the Justice Cut was that the Flash was already such an over-the-top character, and the tone of the film was already so weirdly broken and fragmented with that strange Joss Whedon humor that I don't really like. And obviously with a lot of the backstory scenes cut, you get this like weird caricature of the Flash of Barry Allen that I did not really recognize and did not care to get to know a lot more. But I think with this film, Zack Snyder does a great job of leveling his humor. He is still the same character essentially that we saw in the original cut. He's still like very preppy, very upbeat, fast thinking with a lot of like quips and one-liners. But I think the rest of the tone of the film helps level that kind of humor and that character for him, because when you have a character who's over the top, you kind of want to balance it with everything else around them, which I think Zack Snyder does perfectly here. And I feel like this is a testament to people who are like, Zack Snyder doesn't know how to make fun and outgoing characters. Barry Allen works here. He works fine. Alright, how's everyone doing in the review so far? I feel like whenever I end up doing one of these videos, I just talk and talk for so long, and I'm like, damn, I hope my viewers are okay. I hope you guys have like a drink with you or like a snack with you. Here's a random question. If you watched the Snyder Cut, did you take any breaks? How did you feel about the 4-hour runtime? Because I personally felt that it flew by. I was ready to watch half of it one evening and the other half the next with my friend, and we were just watching it together digitally online. She is not with me presently, unfortunately. And then we got to the halfway point and I was like, damn, that went by fast. And she was like, yeah, it did. And I was just like, do you want to continue? Do you want to like watch the rest tomorrow? Are you tired of this already? Because she hasn't even seen the other two films in the Snyderverse, so I was wondering how invested in it she was, and she was like, no, I'm fine, I'm enjoying this. And I was like, yeah, me too. And we just like continued pressing play. And so I watched it basically for 4 hours straight. And I only had to take a break once because I had to grab some dinner downstairs. But apart from that, I didn't feel like I was trapped in the film. So yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts about how you viewed it and how you felt about the runtime. Alright, so back to the review. We're talking about the Flash here, almost done. One last thing is that the Flash actually plays a crucial role in the finale in a way that is so completely different to what we got in the Justice cut. So here's a little bit of a spoiler. Not that I haven't been dropping spoilers left and right in this review, I should have probably said that in the beginning. So in the finale, when the mother boxes are actually so close to converging, the Flash actually runs so fast that it stops time, and there's a point where it had converged for a brief second, and he runs back in time so fast that it reverses time and the mother boxes unconverge, and it gives him time to generate enough speed to go to Cyborg, and I think he was just shooting some lightning to, I don't know how it works, to like charge up Cyborg so he was actually strong enough to separate them for good. So that was a moment when I was like, what on earth just happened? Did he run back in time? And the answer is yes, he did. And this made a lot more sense when I started thinking about all of the nightmare sequences that are sprinkled into this film, because we saw a little bit of Bruce Wayne's nightmare visions in Batman v Superman. You know, he references that like mysterious event when Barry shoots in and says Lois Lane is the key. He like wakes up from that dream and he's like, what the hell happened? And in this film he actually tells Barry about his dream. He says, I had a dream about you coming in from the future telling me that Lois Lane is the key. And throughout this film we see a bunch more sequences like this, and I will say that I was a little bit confused in some of them because there wasn't a clear distinction between the scene that was actually happening and the nightmare sequences we were getting. So I was like, wait a second, is this happening right now? Or is this like a vision? For example, there's like a scene of Diana being burnt at a pyre in what looks like an Amazonian funeral, and Hippolyta is like crying in tears, and the whole scene looks like it's been turned into apocalypse really, and there are parademons flying around, and it was like kind of indistinguishable from the other scenes before that. And in the epilogue of this film, we get a whole extended nightmare sequence with Bruce Wayne, Mira, Deathstroke, Barry Allen, and the Joker working together to try to stop what looks like an Injustice Superman. The Joker's like antagonizing Bruce Wayne, making references to like his dead Robin. He's saying stuff like, why'd you send a boy to do a man's job, Bruce? And obviously he grinds his gears and everything, but the whole world, like in the backdrop behind them, looks like it's been destroyed essentially. And I'm just like, you guys have bigger problems to deal with at this point. And we see Superman fly in and he has like his red laser eyes, and he's clearly working for Darkseid at this point. So I do wonder, this is like a theory of mine, if that whole timeline is the result of, you know, the timeline that played out when the mother boxes converged before Barry ran back in time, because, you know, the rules of like comic book time travel, there is a multiverse out there. Even though the Flash is blessed with this amazing power of time travel, every time he uses it there is a consequence. So I wonder if this is the consequence of Barry saving the day in the Justice League film. At the same time, there is this alternate universe that is currently playing out because he just didn't do it in time. Anyways, that's like speculation for sequels and all the stuff that we're not even sure we're getting at this point. Aquaman, I feel, is the character who got the least amount of change between the two cuts. But even then, I still think it's a big improvement from what we got. We got an additional scene of him with Willem Dafoe. I think he's called Nereus, I believe. Because remember, this is set before the Aquaman feature film, which I think probably played into why Zack chose to feature him a bit less, because he knew that the film was already going to drop right after this movie, whereas with Cyborg and the Flash, they didn't have anything, you know, in the works yet, so he made sure that we got to know them. So I think it was a great introduction, as brief as it was, to, you know, Aquaman's struggle between being half man and half Atlantean. There are references to Orm and the throne, and, you know, Nereus is just like, you have to come back, which is what he eventually does in the film. But when it comes to Arthur's character, I do think you see him benefiting from, again, more organic interactions with the rest of the team and better fight scenes as well. I think you get to see him use his trident a lot more, especially in the scenes. The first fight scene against Steppenwolf, I thought that was great. They had like a great tag team there going with Barry, Diana, Victor. The fight scenes in this film are a massive improvement to the first one. You get to see them using their like individual, their unique skills a lot more, and you got to see a lot of like duo combos with their powers, which is very cool. So you get the Flash working with Wonder Woman, you get to see Wonder Woman's powers playing off of Aquaman's strength, you get to see Cyborg and the Flash working together. So I think from like a comic book fan perspective, it is so much fun to see the way their powers and their skill sets are depicted in this film. Alright, so the final character that we're going to be talking about is Henry Cavill's Superman. It is a breath of fresh air to see him without the CGI on his face this time. He feels more like a person compared to a caricature of Superman who makes quips about truth and justice. You really feel his impact from the movie. I felt like Zack Snyder really put us through it in that first scene, when you hear his cry reverberating throughout the entire planet, and that's what awakens the mother boxes, because Earth's greatest hero, their guardian, the strongest thing against an alien invasion like this, has just died. And it was just like painful to watch as a person. And I know Zack Snyder gets a lot of flack for portraying, you know, Superman as like this distant, godlike figure that is so far removed from the rest of us, and putting him like up on a pedestal. This is another conversation entirely, which I'm happy to do at some point. What I will say is that if you have enjoyed his take on the character since Man of Steel and in Batman v Superman, it will feel like a whole trilogy in here, because I think that's the important thing that the fans wanted, was to see his story fully realized and fully come full circle in a way. Because when it comes to the cape and the symbol of Superman, I don't think Clark was fully ready to become it yet until this film, until he was brought back to life. The main conflict of Man of Steel is him coming into the role of a hero based on what he's been taught when he's grown up, his values from his family. You get to see the two worlds colliding inside him, and he is not sure how to reconcile that. And his first experience with a Kryptonian is General Zod, which is not great. And in Batman v Superman, we see him already having taken up the cape and already being that symbol for people, but he also becomes a target for political purposes. One of the main fronts that he tries to fight Bruce Wayne is as Clark Kent, is by using his voice as a journalist, because as a symbol, as Superman, people still don't trust him, and he does not have full ownership of the symbol that he is, the person that he is when he puts on the cape. And so in this film, you really get to see the whole team is born of his legacy, and you get to see how powerful Superman as a symbol can be. When he fights Steppenwolf in the finale, I have never seen him look more comfortable in the suit. And what I liked about this finale is that while it did utilize his superhuman strength, like he was taking down Steppenwolf like it was nobody's business. But the way the pieces fell together very much felt like a team effort. Like I said, you had Cyborg dealing with the mother boxes, you had Wonder Woman who like decapitates him, you had Batman who basically came up with the entire plan and put this whole thing into place in motion. Aquaman was also helping restrain Steppenwolf. And you had Barry Allen running back in time to save them. So when it comes to seeing Superman actually displaying his like strength and like his invincibility, it did feel like just a much needed assist for a team that had already come together because of him anyway. And as far as Superman film goes, I really hope that Warner Brothers takes forward a Man of Steel 2. And I did say Man of Steel 2 instead of Justice League 2 because I'm about to make some commentary on those nightmare scenes. So we're finally going to talk about those nightmare scenes, and what seems to happen in the end is that Lois Lane has died and Superman has become an agent of Darkseid. So this is basically like an Injustice storyline that they're trying to do. I'm personally all for it. I love the comic books and I would love to see this vision realized. I think the world that Zack Snyder has set up is just so exciting to be in, and there is nothing like it in our comic book landscape right now. Honestly, no one is making movies like Zack Snyder in like that grand epic scale. So he has the market cornered for this, but I would still try to prioritize Man of Steel 2. The reason why I wouldn't want to jump straight into the storyline is because I think it takes a little bit more of setting up to get general audiences more into it. Like I said, I was personally a little bit confused as well until I sat with it for a while, read some theories online, and I was like, okay, I think this makes sense, but I think the general audiences would still need to catch up a little bit more with this. But at the same time, I wouldn't want them to go to a Justice League film where they didn't have a Superman for the majority of it. Because we didn't have him here. Like, he was dead, he came back at the end, it was a great comeback, but if we go straight to a film where, like, Superman is completely evil, I don't think the masses will take too well to that, and it will feel a little bit samey if we follow that same thing of, we've lost Superman, and by the end, we have him back. It will be very similar to what we had in Justice League. I would suggest padding it out with a Man of Steel movie first, so we get to see him more as a hero coming into that role, and then we'll go into that storyline if we are following that thread. I know a lot of film and comic book review channels are probably covering this exact topic right now, so I'm sure we'll get to hear more about whether this is actually going to happen or not, but personally, I would love to see the Snyderverse continue. Whether that's going to be on the big screen or a streaming service, I am so interested to see how these stories continue, and from the reception I've heard this weekend, even from like casual viewers of DC, and I've heard nothing but positive reviews, so I hope the Warner Brothers execs are listening to this. And of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film. What do you think were the biggest improvements in this cut? And would you like to see the Snyderverse continue? What threads of the story would you most be interested in continuing? That is all for me today. Thank you for tuning into my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you guys have a great week ahead. Goodbye!